going on, everybody? We're here for just a quick, I say episode, Jordan. Just a quick little video talking about the private school top 10, kind of giving it maybe a little bit more in depth. If anybody is like me, not a reader, more of like a watcher, video and audio. So just wanted to go through private school top 10 initial release. This is coming out on March 24th. We're recording this the morning of March 24th. And just wanted to break down the top 10. So the top 10 is as follows. Number 1, Highland School at 4-1. Number 2, Miller School at 3-4. Number 3, Paul VI at 4-2. Number 4, Cape Henry at 9-0. Number 5, St. Anne's Belfield at 8-0-1. Number 6, Bishop O'Connell at 5-1. Number 7, St. John's College High School at 5-1-1. Number 8, Greenbrier Christian at 4-1. Number 9, St. Christopher's at 5-0. Number 10, St. Albans at 3-2-1. Jordan, why are we updating the private school top 10 before we are updating the public, or the Power 25, I should say?
Well, these private schools got to start earlier. They have quite a few more games under their belt than the public schools. So just being comfortable, guys having multiple games on their schedule done and still going through that record. That's why we're doing that. And a lot of these private schools, they've had like a good bulk of their schedules like rolling early. Like Cape Henry's played 9 games. So those guys are scheduling a lot of games on the front half of the year. That's why some of these private schools have more games on the belt than public schools, just because they started early and put a lot of games on the front half of the year. So that's why we're updating private school 10.
Yeah, and a couple of these private schools have already been on spring break as of like a week or two ago. I think Cape Henry went on a spring break trip and played a couple games out of state. Norfolk Academy kind of started their season out on the road in North Carolina. So, yeah, and that's why, like, if you look, it's going to be a little bit confusing for a week. Usually our private school top 10 matches the Power 25 as far as teams that are included in the Power 25. It matches the order, which rightfully so. But because of the fact that there is that overlap of that week, the private schools inside of the Power 25 are not going to match the private school top 10. For example, Miller School is still number 1 in the Power 25, and they're number 2 in the private school top 10. Obviously, there's a good chance that is going to change with the week that they have. It could even change back to potentially Miller School being number 1, depending on what happens with everybody this week. But moving on, Jordan, why is Highland School, why did they make the move to number 1? And let's just say, like, not a Paul VI, not a Cape Henry, not a Stab. What would you say there?
Well, for Highland, they had the signature win out of all those teams. They had the best win, going to Miller and beating Miller on their field. Early on in the season, that's one of the top wins that any team can get in the state right now. Just how the schedule's built out for some of these teams. But for Highland, they went to Miller. They took down Miller. They were our preseason number 1 team. So they had that signature win early on in the year. And that's, well-deserving for taking over that number 1 spot.
Yeah, and you look at Highland's number 12 currently in the Power 25, and you got like a PVI who is number 4 and a Bishop O'Connell who's a number 6. PVI, they've played a couple of good games, quality opponents. What I think they played, was it Spalding, Jordan?
Yeah, they played Spalding.
They played Spalding. They played Gonzaga, and they played someone else. So PVI and Highland have a common opponent in Gonzaga. And I believe Highland beat Gonzaga 6-3 at Gonzaga. PVI had to score. Am I right, Jordan? If I remember, they were trailing in the 7th and came back. And won that game. And I was at the Highland in the Gonzaga game, and Highland was in control of that game pretty much the entire time. Now, I will say in the defense is that Gonzaga threw their two best versus PBI, um, where uh, where Highland School got some freshmen from Gonzaga. Granted, at least one freshman with Charlie Garden threw extremely well that day, but um, that, like Jordan said, that's kind of where we're at. Is that like honestly, Highland has, and don't take this, somebody will, but don't take it the wrong way. They have the worst loss of any of those teams that could potentially be in that one spot, but they also have the best win. And Jordan was at that game that Highland lost, and it was kind of one swing of the bat. Um, and they, what was it, 2-0 was the final.
Yeah.
And shout out to Stewart and Coach Seacrest. He's always Coach Seacrest pulling out his May moves during March. But Highland's definitely the more talented, if you will, roster. But again, that's probably the worst loss of any of those top teams. But it was an extremely competitive game. So now you got three undefeated teams. I guess you could say Stab has that one tie. You have Cape Henry at 9-0, St. Anne's Belfield at 8-0-1, and St. Chris at 5-0. What would you say? Like, because you got three undefeated teams, and then you have teams with at least one loss. Miller School with 4 losses inside of the top 3, and none of those teams are inside of the top 3. Why would you say that none of those teams are maybe higher than what they are?
I think yes, they have more wins than some of these other teams, but I just do think the strength of schedule. Where like Stab, they beat a good O'Connell team. Like that's a signature win, but I think there's a few more wins that they need to have to, be up a little bit higher. It's the same thing with St. Chris and um, Cape Henry. I think this upcoming week, I think this definitely challenged themselves for those teams. But got to win those games, and definitely can see some movement. But I think just early on, some of those strength of scheduling wins, like definitely they're definitely convincing with how much runs been scored with some of those teams. But I think overall, I think the quality of competition needs to be a little bit higher, to make a higher move over some of these teams that are ahead of them.
Yeah, I think like in Cape's situation, they're 9-0. It's been convincing wins, right? I mean, going to Grassfield and win 10-0. Some of their other wins, like putting up a ton of runs, convincing wins, but they don't have that signature win. I think if you give Cape a win, like Stab has a win over Bishop O'Connell. They went into Bishop O'Connell and beat them by 1, last Friday. I think if you give them a signature win like that, you're talking about them, probably in that 1 or 2 spot. I wouldn't say any lower than 2. They just don't have that one signature win to really push them up. It's kind of like, you know, maybe a bad comp, but like the Miami of Ohio thing, right? Like win 30 games or whatever, but didn't play a high level of competition yet. They certainly will. They certainly will, and they have hard teams. It just hasn't happened yet early on in the season. Now, Jordan, there's 5 teams. We said we're going to keep this about 10 minutes, so we're going to wrap this up. There's 5 teams sitting on the outside, kind of looking in, if you will. You have Collegiate, you have Atlantic Shores, Gonzaga, Nansemond, Suffolk, Walsingham. I saw Walsingham last night. They lost in extras to Western Branch. What would you say keeps those teams out, or if you want to word it differently, what's going to put them in? Because Nansemond, Suffolk won yesterday, so that should run them to 6-3. Walsingham sitting at 4-2. Like, what puts them in?
I think just with those teams having those signature games and coming out with W's and just stringing some together. I just if you gain some momentum, especially with those higher quality teams, you can easily find. I think you can easily find them making their way into the private top 10. But just getting a string of quality wins, that goes a long way. Like obviously, you put the schedules given in your conference, whatever. But if you can go outside or those quality teams in the conference, you can get those wins and get consistent track of those. I think that's an easy way to find your way into the private top 10.
For sure. And we it's been a lot of talk of quality opponents, good wins, versus bad losses. Um, Gonzaga. Gonzaga's a good example. Like, well, hey, they're 5-3, and there's some teams sitting on the outside that may have fewer losses that are even further back. Right, but their losses are to what? PVI, Highland, and there was one other one. Jordan, do you remember who the other Gonzaga loss was to? I'm putting Jordan on the spot here. It's not. This is not on him. This is on me. I'll wear this one.
It was another like really quality team, I believe, and I think that game was close. If I, but I mean,
Yeah,
I just
bad
think
podcasting. Landon, and
yeah,
they threw their Southern Cal commit, Bo White.
yeah,
They lost 4-1. They've lost 6-3, and they lost 3-2 to PBI. Other than that, they've had convincing wins. They beat Benedictine by 10. They beat Georgetown Prep, who beat Miller School. They beat Bishop Ireton by 7. They beat OLGC by 15. They beat St. Mary's Riken by 5. So they've they've beaten the teams that they're, I say, supposed to beat. They just haven't had that one key win to kind of push them over the top. But we've talked about a lot of quality competition and good wins versus bad losses and all of those things. Kind of circling back to that, you can only play the teams that are on your schedule as far as players are concerned. Right now, a lot of these coaches make the schedule, so a lot of times in public school, the ADs have a lot of say over the schedule. We were talking to Grafton's head coach this past weekend. They get one game out of district because another district team moved in or whatever. So like he doesn't have any control over who he plays, Coach Heiser. But a lot of these private schools do have control for the most part of who they play. Maybe not when they play, but who they play. But at the same time, you look at Miller School, have 4 losses. There's not a single bad loss. Like Georgetown Prep may not be as strong as they were last year. Maybe, I don't know. They're a Maryland team, but I know they lost some important pieces. And Highland School is really good. And then they go down and they lose 3-0 to Stoneman Douglas and face one of the best arms in the country in Gio Rojas. And then they played the first game. We watched that game. They were up 5? They were up 4 or 5
in the 7th. Yep.
Yeah, they were up 4 or 5 in the 7th. The Tampa Jesuit, one of the like top 25, top 30 teams in the country. So, like, while they do have to win those games at some point, we do have to penalize them for not winning some of those games, especially when you come back here. You go in there and lose 2 to them, like, okay, right? Those teams have played 10, 12, 15 games. You come back up here and stumble twice in a week, or back-to-back days, I should say. Then we have to look at it. And then, like I said, the head-to-head between those two. But plenty of time for that stuff to change. Any closing thoughts, Jordan, on this top 10 or anything going forward?
I think this just shakes up for a good rest of the year, and see some guys start making some momentum, some guys getting back on track. There's plenty of games for these schools this week, so you definitely see another change next week because it's a loaded week full of good scheduled games. So definitely some games to look out for in this private top 10.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate everybody joining us. Again, that was the private school top 10 initial release, and we will see everybody again soon.